Good morning. One more time, good morning. I know many of you are looking to find your seats, and we're going to get started. This is one of my favorite programs of the year. And as we get started, I'm not going to be like Stuart, who usually calls out names if you're not in your seat, but I invite you to find your seat. My name is Lupita Sanchez Cornejo, and I'm the chairman of the board of VICA. And we are also proud to be here today as a sponsor of the Extraordinary Women in Leadership event representing AT&T. Such a great event. I know, I'll ask how many of you have been to this event in the past? Now let me introduce Marty Adams, who is the general manager of the LA Department of Water and Power and one of our biggest supporters and sponsors every year.
Thank you, Lupita, and good morning, everyone. It's a great pleasure to be here today and to be part of welcoming you to the 5th Extraordinary Women in Leadership Breakfast. As one of your presenting sponsors today, the Department of Water and Power is extremely proud to be here and really continue our role in supporting the extraordinary women of Los Angeles. I'm excited personally to be here to join VICA and all of our community partners and to recognize the talented and dedicated women who have really helped to lead and shape this city. In keeping with the theme of extraordinary women in leadership, I'm proud that I get to work with so many of our extraordinary women here at LADWP, and we have a number of them here, right, the first couple tables. You might be surprised to learn that women do play a very important and large role in running water, power, and wastewater utilities throughout the United States and the rest of the world. As a matter of fact, last week I was in London along with many other water leaders, quite a few of them women that are at the top of their organizations or right below the top of the organizations. And we were there, and amongst the things we did was listen to 2 of the top women who run water agencies in Ukraine and are dealing with the ravages of war and water service. It was phenomenal to listen to them and their stories, women leading the industry in a war-torn country. And here at home, my incoming successor, Janice Quinones, will be the 2nd woman to take the helm of the nation's largest municipal utility, and she'll be starting in about a month, so that's a great thing. Just about a month ago for Women's History Month, I witnessed our women leaders at Water and Power shine as they put on our first ever Women in the Trade Summit, trying to get us to the point where the term women in non-traditional roles is just a thing of the past. They held their annual Women's Nature Walk, this time it was at Encino Reservoir, opening up to all of our employees and families. And both these showcase your leadership and really the camaraderie among the women at DWP at all levels of the organization. And these are also the same people who make sure that you have water and power every single day of the year. Over the past years, DWP has placed a renewed focus on initiatives for women in the workplace. We established a Women's Council in 2021 in partnership with IBEW Local 18 to help support and elevate the women in our workforce. And they had a number of initiatives that they've accomplished. They've conducted women leadership summits to help develop future women leaders of our organization. We've expanded to 15 lactation lounges and rooms for employees who are nursing moms. We've made improvements to family medical leave and additional time off for new mothers. And our Women's Career and Wellness Expo, the 2nd of which is going to be taking place next Saturday, is there to amplify our job recruitment and especially highlight opportunities for girls and women in what we call non-traditional roles. And last year, we attracted over 2,000 women to that event. So initiatives like these are imperatives to enable us to move into the future in a way that supports women, not only as working professionals and leaders, but also in their other roles in life as mothers and caretakers, and all the things that they're expected to do at the same time that they help build and lead this city. So important progress is not possible without the insight and diligent work of our female leaders who identify and tackle the issues that often make it difficult for them to succeed, much more difficult than it is often for their male counterparts. I've been lucky to work with many women over my career, my 40-year career at Water and Power. I've had a number of women bosses who I now realize at that time they were probably trailblazers in their area. And I know that their legacy continues thanks to the women in this room, the women from Water and Power, and the other women who work to support us. And we continue to inspire and break through barriers so these folks will lead the way for the women who follow them in their footsteps. I'd also like to acknowledge VICA's partnership in this endeavor, which would not be a success without the CSUN Nazarian College of Business and Economics. VICA appreciates all that you do and all your support and collaboration. So now the important business of the day. Before we get started, a reminder that if you didn't drop your business card in the raffle, you should do so pretty quickly here. You have a chance to win some beautiful Kendra Scott jewelry, a VICA swag basket, probably has pictures of Stuart in there, they always do, but with tickets to the Valley Village Prom and round trip tickets on Southwest Airlines. And a reminder that you have to stay to the end of the drawing to win, so winner must be present. So speaking of our other sponsors, let me take a minute to mention them today. Our co-sponsors today are Amazon, Hollywood Burbank Airport, Cal Communications, the Garland, HealthNet, Kaiser Permanente, SoCal Gas, US Bank, and Wells Fargo. We'd also like to thank our other sponsors who are listed in the program and on the PowerPoint, as you see, well, you see me right there, but well, when you eat, you'll see the PowerPoint. I also want to take a moment. I know there's something over a couple dozen CSUN students here today, as well as some students from Granada Hills Charter School. So I'd like to ask them to stand and be recognized. All of our students. Welcome and thank you for joining us. I realize that everyone in the room has their own individual reasons for being here right now, being amongst incredible leaders who will no doubt bolster our industry, improve our economy, and transform our communities. But it is your individual passions and drive that bring us together today. And together, I know you are a powerful force that will help to lead the city into the future. So thank you for this opportunity to greet everyone this morning. And at this point, I'd like to bring up the one and only past VICA Chair, Lisa Gritzner from LG Strategies. What? After Lupita gives a commercial break. There we go.
Thank you, Marty. And as Lisa comes up, I wanted to take a moment to acknowledge these two powerhouse women who chair this event. I've had the pleasure of working with both of them for probably 25, 27 years. And that's Lisa Gritzner and the Honorable Wendy Gruhl, who step up and do this program every year. And so I wanted to just acknowledge them and have Wendy and Lisa stand. Thank you.
Thank you so much, you guys. I can't believe I'm standing here in a room full of 400 people. We created this event not that long ago, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, and it has grown every year. We have grown out of our spaces, and regularly folks tell me that this is their favorite VICA event. I think they might just be sucking up a little bit, but I accept it. I really do. As Lupita said, this was Wendy and my brainchild. When I became the chair of VICA, and I'm so proud that Lupita is here in wearing in my pumps or in the pumps of me, and I was the first woman chair in 30 plus years, and only the second woman chair of VICA in the history of the organization. And so I felt like there was a need for a conversation, and that when we talk about business and when we talk about leadership, women have so much to offer, and we bring so much to the table, and we look at the world so differently. And so I really wanted to celebrate the women in business in the San Fernando Valley, and I wanted to do something to elevate the conversation. And Wendy, of course, who is someone who I've admired and had the chance to work with in City Hall and who is a friend, I couldn't think of a better person to be part of this journey because of all of the things that she has done to lift up women and to set a standard and to blaze a trail and to pull the women with her who have come after her. So I couldn't be more proud of this event. And thank you guys for voting for this event with your pocketbooks. It's very, very important. Now, one of the best things about getting to put this event together is that I get to decide or be part of the team that decides what we're going to do and what we're going to talk about and who we're going to invite. And I have to be honest with you that Michelle Gaskill-Hames, who I'm going to be introducing and have the chance to speak with, was my first choice. The minute she came to Southern California, I called Yesenia at Kaiser and I said, you know that women's event that we do like 6 months from now? I really want her to be one of our keynote speakers. And so I'm so blessed to have her here. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Michelle, and then I'm going to invite her up and we're going to have a chat. But Michelle Gaskill-Hames is the regional president for Kaiser Permanente in Southern California and Hawaii. She directs health plan and hospital operations to provide healthcare services for over 5 million Kaiser Permanente members in Southern California and Hawaii. Her 15 years as a healthcare executive has focused on value-based care, high-quality organizing, and community impact. She serves on the California Hospital Association Executive Board, the Martin Luther King Community Healthcare Board, and the board of the National Healthcare Standards Institute. She also serves on the CEO Council of the Los Angeles Chamber of Commerce, the Southern California Leadership Council, and most recently was asked to join Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass's business cat. Would you guys all join me in welcoming Michelle Gaskill-Hames? Is this thing on? Awesome. Welcome. All right. Well, the best part about this format is this conversation, I think, because I think that's what makes women such effective leaders, is our ability to communicate with each other. So I'm really excited that you have agreed to join us today, and I'm really excited that you moved to Southern California.
Me too.
And the best part is that you've moved to the Valley. So how are you feeling? How are you enjoying the Valley?
I love the Valley. And mental note not to wear a dress when you're sitting up here. So I'm just going to position myself here. Yeah, I'm a Midwestern girl, meat and potatoes through and through. Made my way to California 8 years ago, Northern Cal first, and then I've been in Southern Cal for 2 years, all in Sherman Oaks. I love the Valley. I really love the Valley. And when I was moving, and we can clap for that. I love it. When I was determining where to move in Southern California, we wanted to be in a vibrant community with diversity, with culture, with great dining, with real feel of community with the neighborhood. And I found that, and I absolutely love it. People told me, oh, now you're going to be a real Valley girl. I didn't know what that meant, but I'm claiming it now. I'm a Valley girl. And part of that is the small businesses, all of the businesses really have strengthened our community, our healthcare environment. Certainly, we're proud at Kaiser Permanente. We've got our Woodland Hills Medical Center. We've got our Panorama City Medical Center and 6 medical offices in the Valley. Education, all the things that make a healthy community are right here. We're very proud to support the Valley.
Well, the Valley is lucky to have you. One of the things we're going to focus on today is the importance of women joining boards to provide governance for both for-profit and nonprofit organizations. We know that Kaiser Permanente supports hundreds of nonprofit organizations via grants and sponsorships, but why do you also encourage your leaders to be part of governance of community organizations?
Thank you for the question. And I want to thank you, Lisa, in coordinating the topic for today, and also Lupita and Stuart. I'm glad that we're having this conversation about governance. I have had a chance to attend this breakfast and celebrate women in leadership. And it's so important. We still have a lot of work to do to have representation in the C-suite. And we need that conversation about having representation in the boardroom too, because our leaders lead the mission, they guide the organization. Our board members actually set the vision and the mission, and we need to be in the room where that happens too, for-profit and not-for-profit. And so really glad that we're having this conversation. We at Kaiser Permanente are very committed to supporting nonprofit, not-for-profit businesses, and those that are focused on enriching the community. And so we give grants out in the areas of housing, education, fitness and wellness, so many other areas that strengthen the community. And in addition to supporting with funding, we also want to bring our leadership into that. And so we do promote that our executives and our leaders are actively engaged as board members. And so actually a great example of that is Murtaza Sanwari is actually here. He's our Woodland Hills SVP and is on the VICA board. And since our topic is women in leadership and women in governance, we are very active in promoting that our women get involved, our female executives get involved in board governance as well. And it's two things. One is to bring our thoughts, our leadership, our perspective, but it's also important, and it actually fills our hearts. It fills our cup. I feel that being in service in a board enriches our, that personal aspect as well.
We know that you have personally served on boards, both outside of LA and now in LA. Can you tell us about your experience with the nonprofit boards that you've been involved with? What key topics have you contributed to? And how has the experience benefited you in your career?
For me, board service is service. Sometimes we talk about being on boards, and I think as an early careerist, I used to think, okay, I need to have that on my resume. But in actuality, being on a board is not about resume building. It is all about committing time. And for our not-for-profits, this is your voluntary time. And it's about giving your expertise, your thought leadership. And so I've been fortunate and blessed to have the opportunity to participate in a number of boards. You mentioned some of them. And the boards that I've served on fall into two categories. One of them is professional organizations that I actually do have expertise in as a subject matter expert. And so for me, it's about being able to bring perspective there. And it's also learning from others. So you mentioned California Hospital Association, and certainly we have a perspective. I can bring our vision and our focus on value-based care from Kaiser Permanente, but I learn so much from others that are a part of that organization, rural hospitals that are dealing with different kinds of challenges. So it's also educational for me. And so there's that perspective. And then I'm also on a number of boards that are not-for-profit, and they connect to my passion. And so one of them, I'm on the board for an art museum. And, art is one of the passions that I have. And you mentioned MLK Community Healthcare. While that's a healthcare organization, that fits into a board that's a passion of mine. I'm committed, and I have been since I entered healthcare, to addressing healthcare inequities and closing the gap across our communities. Certainly, I am able to do that through Kaiser Permanente, but if you know Martin Luther King Hospital and the challenges that they've been through, I'm really excited to be able to sit and to listen and to find out how we support and elevate them as well. And so my message there is that as you're considering boards, because a lot of times it's voluntary, we're not focusing as much on corporate boards today, it should be something that, again, it fills your cup, you're committed to, you're passionate about, because then I think you lean in and you're a better board member.
I'm going to ask you a little bit of an off-the-cuff question here, but I think people here, especially some of the folks who are younger in the audience, they may be worried like, oh, I'm busy at work and I don't want to take time out of my work day, or, what if the meetings are in the middle of the day, and is it okay for me to ask my supervisor or the leaders in my company? What kind of advice can you give younger people as they're maybe looking to get involved in these types of organizations? How do they present it to their leaders? How do leaders look at that from your position? What do you see in your staff that are getting involved? Just a little bit of guidance or thoughts there.
I love that question. And what I would say is talk to your leadership about it. I think you'll be surprised. Serving on a board shows your commitment to development. It's developing you, and it's also giving you a platform to contribute. And leaders look at that as a positive thing for development for you. So I think you'd be surprised that if you approach your leadership and ask them, and express why you're interested in that board, I'm thinking you're going to get support. I know we support our teams. I actually get excited when folks come forward and say, hey, I have this opportunity to serve and to strengthen my community by participating. My first thing is absolutely, how do we help you do that? I would encourage you to do that. And then I would think about the time commitments, because boards are different. Some of them are very much working boards, roll up your sleeves, and they do have the time commitment. And others are more advisory. And so you do have to be honest about what kind of time you can commit to. It's really important that you don't sign up to be on a board and then you're not present, because these organizations are looking for your leadership. And so you want to make sure it's a commitment you can actually make.
There's so many wonderful nonprofits that we can all support in different ways. And Kaiser Permanente is also a nonprofit. What type of impact does your own board have on Kaiser Permanente's operations and strategy, and even on your day-to-day existence within the organization?
We have a dynamo board. We have 12 board members. I'm really proud. We have 4 female board members that govern Kaiser Permanente. All of them are dynamic. They were dynamic in their industries, and now they are pushing us to be better for our members and for our patients. One great example, Dr. Regina Benjamin is the past U.S. Surgeon General about a decade ago, and her platform for the whole country, she was America's doctor in that role, her platform was about prevention. And so it's a perfect fit for us as our model is Thrive. And so she's constantly pushing us in that space on what more can we do, bringing technology in to get upstream and really helping our patients thrive. She also is very focused on addressing inequities, passion of mind, and so she pushes us in that. We also have Jenny Ming, who's the former CEO of U.S. Navy, what's the retail? Old Navy, I'm sorry, Old Navy. Navy something.
I'm thinking about boats, and you're thinking about jeans.
Old Navy. And the push that she does is all about consumerism. It's all about understanding what members, patients, customers want and need. And so she's pushing us hard because healthcare industry has been a little bit behind, if we're honest, in that space. So, and then we've got 2 other phenomenal. We've got Leslie Heiss, who's a banking industry, and she is, she's on our finance committee, and just pushing us and really phenomenal. And Judy Johansson, who is over a utilities company. So women on boards, the data shows actually produce stronger organizations. There was an S&P study that showed that having gender diversity in boards, those organizations actually demonstrate stronger financial results, more innovative ideas, and better collaboration with partners. And we are certainly seeing that on our governance.
Well, I think also women just bring more care and feeding to the board dynamics. And I know when some of the boards that I've joined, and we talked about this as we were sort of preparing for this event, but I joined a board of a healthcare organization, and it's not even my area of expertise. And they reached out to me because they were looking for someone who had policy, experience and political experience. And when I joined, I was so intimidated by the subject matter because that's not my subject matter area of expertise at all. And I found that the women that were on the board really took me under their wing and helped me learn. And I was on that board for 10 years, and I ended up being the chairwoman of the board eventually. But have you had that experience in the boards that you've been a part of and can you talk a little bit about that? Yeah. And both when you joined and also how do you interact with your other members?
Absolutely. So first of all, I think last breakfast, there was some conversation about imposter syndrome. And it's something that we all have to grapple with. And absolutely, I have felt that. On the first board I was on, it was a while ago, and I was early in my career, and I'm thinking, what can I possibly offer to this organization? And I would come to the board meetings, like just sitting, listening to everybody and thinking, what do I have to contribute? And as the conversation would go forward, I saw that they selected me for a reason. And so it was important for me to get out of my head and actually listen and lean in because I was there. They wanted a particular perspective. And so I say that to all of you that are on boards or seeking boards. When you get into the room, you may look around and you may say, do I belong here? You absolutely belong here. You absolutely belong in that role. And your voice is really important. You have something to add. That's why you were selected. And so if you don't, you're doing a disservice to the organization if you lean out. You got to lean in to the conversation. And then in terms of the nurturing culture, so, and I don't believe in stereotypes, but one of the stereotypes of women is that we're very good at the soft skills. Can we be tough, right? Well, first of all, we've proven we could be tough through everything, right? And for those that are moms, I mean, we know how to be tough. But the soft skills, let's just think about that. I don't believe the soft skills should be called soft skills, because the idea of having high emotional intelligence, being compassionate, being collaborative, those are the things that we need now in business. The old school way was being top-down driven and tough and just driving hard. The new school way, the most effective organizations now are those that have listening ears, they value their employees, they build partnerships, and they support their teams. Those are the ones that are the most innovative. Those are qualities that traditionally were associated with women. And so they need us. Organizations need us now, and it's important that we step up in leadership, but also in governance. And actually, see, now I'm talking too much. But
no, not at all. I don't think anybody here thinks you're talking too much.
one more thing that I think about in governance, it's a very hot topic for boards. Investors are looking at companies, and they look at ESG. Have you ever heard the term ESG? ESG is a set of criteria that investors look at to say, well, how strong is this company? Is this a company I want to align with? And ESG stands, the E is for environmental considerations. Is this an organization that is conscious of their footprint? Are they a green organization, good environmental stewards? What are they doing in that space? S is around social concerns. Are they socially responsible? Are they looking at, leaning into their communities and making their communities stronger? Addressing challenges of, food insecurity or housing insecurity or whatever those issues are in their community, are they leaning in to make their community better? And the G is all around, it's governance. Do they have diverse boards? Do they have diverse perspectives? How are they managing risk? Those are priorities. And when you look at ESG for those organizations that do have women on their boards, their factors in ESG, these elements tend to be stronger. So there's a lot of evidence that says we need to be in the boardroom.
I agree with that. I want to do a quick time check. Is there, Jessica? How are we doing on time? Oh, see, this is wonderful. We get so much of your time today. Let me ask you another question that I really am curious about. One of the reasons why I decided to push us to do this topic is that I'm very interested in, as I grow in my career, how do I transition? I've done nonprofit boards, but I would love to serve on a corporate board. And I think that, we're going to demystify the process a little bit in some of our next conversations, which I think is really exciting. But if you had advice to give to either your younger self or to anyone in this room about how do you position yourself? What do you do to make yourself relevant, whether it's a nonprofit board or a corporate board? What are the kinds of things we can do to make ourselves ready?
Yeah, it's a great, I love that you're bringing this forward, because I think there was a thinking that, and this is not a good thinking, but there's a thinking about that you don't think about corporate boards until you're ready to retire. And if you're thinking at that point, you're thinking about it too late because you haven't positioned yourself well. And this happens a lot where leaders are at that point of retirement and they're looking and saying, okay, now I'm ready to get on that corporate board. And they haven't built the network. They haven't positioned themselves to be known for something that makes that transition easier. So what I would say is that if you are interested in a corporate board or not-for-profit board, you need to start, I say first and foremost, as I was saying, what are you interested in? Because it's not just about getting on a board just to say I'm on board. It's about, where can you lend your expertise? What are you good at? What's your perspective? What's your industry that you think could add value to another organization? What are you passionate? Keep going back to that word. What are you passionate about? Right? You want to get fired up about this particular subject. And then it's looking at, well, what types of organizations match that? And how do you start to build your brand toward that? I've mentioned a couple times, like if I was to, build a brand for myself, it really is about, I got into healthcare because I believe that We have inequities that exist across communities, and it's very important to me that we lean in, we make healthcare, it's a right, it's not a privilege, we make it accessible for everybody. And I have the privilege that my organization stands on that platform, so I get to do that every day, but how can I do that even more in a board seat? So I would take a step back and think, what are you passionate about? What's your life's purpose? And then in what ways what are the boards that would position you to carry that out? Start branding yourself around that, start networking. This is a great room to practice that networking today. Students, you're here and you're hearing this early in your career. I'm hoping you're ready to network and meet some people, walk away with some business cards, nurture those relationships. Those are some of the keys, I think, to being ready when you are ready to serve. And then it's also important to be ready to serve because, again, I said this before, but it sounds good to put on a resume, but it's time consuming to do it well. So you also have to look at your ability, your time commitments. Are you ready to make them? Because when you get on, you want to be able to do the job well.
I think that's really good advice, and I'm excited to hear some of the other thoughts that folks have here today. Do you want to leave us with any last thoughts on anything that you're thinking about?
On anything?
It's rare that we get time like this with leaders such as yourself. And so, I always want to make sure that we're not just honoring you in the ways that we want to hear from you, but this is a room full of people who are young, middle of their career, getting maybe towards the end. Do you have anything to share? What are your thoughts? What are you passionate about today in the world? Anything?
Yeah, thank you, Lisa. First of all, thank you for the very kind introduction. I'm really excited because I'm learning. I've only been in my role. It's been less than a year in this role. And so I'm networking. I'm meeting people in the room for the first time. I'm building relationships. So I think the message I would leave is that no matter where you are in your career, we've got early careerists in here, we've got mid-careers, we've got folks, I just learned some folks are getting ready to retire and they put in their 40 years. I'm looking at Marty. But no matter where you are in your career, you're constantly in a mode of learning and building. And so don't feel like it's too late to be thinking about boards. Don't feel like it's too early. Even beyond boards, this whole imposter syndrome, we're all on this journey together. And so you're sitting in rooms and it's too often where we feel like, well, do I know enough? Have I been here? Am I an outsider? You got to put that behind you. Everybody sitting in this room has something to contribute in your organizations. You have something to contribute outside your organizations in the community. And I would say just put those thoughts behind you and lean in and make those contributions. It's going to make our organizations much, much stronger, and that's what we need.
Thank you so much, Michelle.
Thank you very much.
I'm here or not. All right, let's see. Am I supposed to be up here still? So, all right, they didn't get the old hook out, so that's good. Let's see here. Got to get to the right place in the booklet. Okay. That was really just such a pleasure for me to get to talk to Michelle. As you can see, she's an amazing leader, and we're very lucky that she's here in Southern California leading such an amazing organization like Kaiser Permanente that plays such an important role in our community. And I love the fact that they're focused on not just the healthcare components, but they're recognizing the role that housing and healthy food and being in a community that cares about you plays in people's overall health. And so I think that's really important. And we do have a lovely gift for you on your table donated by our friends at Kendra Scott. That's fun. I really like that they're part of our, swag situation here, because I feel like that's very on brand for Wendy and I, that you're getting nice pieces of jewelry as thank you gifts. So I'm excited about that. Now we're going to move to something that we've never done before. So that's really exciting. And I am excited to introduce my friend, Jenna Dillon. We're going to do a fast break. And Jenna's gonna walk around. She is an amazing CEO and founder for Executive Performance Institute for Coaching, also known as EPIC. And she's gonna walk around and she's gonna talk to us about how female leaders have the upper brain. So please join me in giving a warm welcome to Jenna Dillon.
Is this on? It's on. Hi, everyone. How are we feeling? Good? I'm going to come down to your level. I don't want to be up here. You get me twice today. Welcome. Okay, so we're going to have a fun neuroscience conversation. As a disclaimer, I'm not a neuroscientist, but the work that I do, is somewhat, like I have to know some neuroscience to be able to do my job well. And so without getting too technical, some of the things we're going to be talking about today are the distinctions between a male brain and a female brain. There actually are different genetic distinctions between the two of them. Now, we won't be able to cover all of them because I got 10 minutes with you, but hopefully we'll cover a couple that could actually spark some intrigue, I'll say, and some good questions to help spark what does this actually mean about not just who we are when we were born, but how we can actually play to our strengths in a way that helps all people, not just women supporting women. So on that note, I'll make one more disclaimer. This is not a gender identity conversation. No, really, and I say that genuinely because when I say female brain, I mean when you are born and you are given that sex from the doctors, you also have that brain. That's what we're talking about. And vice versa for the male brain, you are given that sex and that brain at birth, right? So this isn't a gender identity conversation because we could go into a lot of different directions in 10 minutes. So to make it narrow. Okay, so before we get into the distinctions, let's just talk about the brain. We have the right hemisphere, we have the left hemisphere. What does it mean to be right brain oriented? Analytical? Other way. Creative, yes, creative. What else? Artistic. What else? Imaginative. We like the we like the fiction. We like getting creative in our thinking and finding new ways to go about. We don't necessarily play by the rules. We think outside the box, right? And then if we look at left brain orientation, what does that usually entail? Huh? I can't hear you. Logic, thank you. What else? Analytical, yes. What else? Critical thinking, very good. Very linear, very process-oriented, right? Strategic, was there another? Structure, yes, thank you. So keeping that in mind with right and left brain orientation, a little bit about anatomy outside of that, and this is the one technical term I'm going to use today, so you're going to learn something hopefully, is that there's a line between the two hemispheres that's a white matter cable. It's called the corpus callosum. Say it? Great. That corpus callosum is actually bigger and thicker in a female brain than that of a male brain. And what that means is that in a female brain, it's more easy for the data or processing to bounce to and from one hemisphere to the other. It's not only more easy, it happens at a higher frequency and at a more intensity, right? That's interesting. So what that means is not only research studies suggest that it's one of the reasons why female brains tend to have more bilaterally symmetrical, try to say that 10 times fast, is a female brain where it doesn't happen as often to have that bilateral symmetricality, gosh, my words, in a male brain. So, and then within the information going to and from the hemispheres, more often in a female brain, in a male brain, that means information ends up getting transferred in local, the information gets processed in local regions of the brain. That tends to happen more in a male brain versus a female brain. So what does that mean in terms of how that shows up in our day-to-day behaviors? And because they've actually found that there are correlations to behavioral traits within those distinctions. So what that can mean is that female brain, or those people that have female brains, it's easier for them to build an ability to have a larger emotional bandwidth than those who have a male brain. Now, there's other components to that too, but there is that correlation. So what does that mean as people who have female brains in our leaders where they can have an upper hand. More flexibility, yeah. What else? Multitasking, okay? Emotional intelligence. I like that you know that word. Compassionate, empathy, good, yeah. We got more. We got brilliant minds in here. What else? Detail-oriented, yes. So when you're so one of the things that I say in leadership and for leaders in the room is you want to know someone's most authentic leadership style, put them in a high-stakes, stressful situation and see how they treat themselves. Woo! So when you put a female brain in a high-stakes situation, what studies have shown is they end up being more confident in their decision-making, what they end up doing, because they are able to better easily look at both the analytical and the emotional side more easily. They can process it much more easily and consider all sides. So they'll more often will have the tendency to be considering other people's well-being, all key stakeholders in a situation that are involved. What's their well-being? What are their concerns? What are their stress points? What are their doubts? And how can that be a part of my decision-making and what we're going to do in this situation? Fascinating, right? Okay, now, with any strength, it can have an Achilles heel, right? So part of the nature of my work when I work with clients is you're not only trying to help an individual, an executive, increase their abilities that they already have because it's their strengths, but at some point, if they increase them too much or are in certain situations, it's counter-effective. It's counterproductive, right? So in that context, where is it important for us to be aware and acknowledge where these strengths can actually get the best of us? What was that? Overthinking? Okay, tell me more. Overwhelming. So yes, you're hitting on emotions. Yes, we can make decisions in a state of overwhelm because we're in our emotions more. There we go. What else? Where else could our strengths get the best of us for those of us who have female brains? Analysis paralysis. Yeah, it's interesting terms to hear because the word analysis actually goes to analytical, but and it's one of those things like to spot it, like we can spot if someone's stuck in their, but the word analysis actually goes to the intellectual, analytical, like semantics. But often when people get in this analysis paralysis, it's actually emotionally based. So I just want to point that out. So yes, where else can it show up as it getting the best of us? Huh? Too much on our plate. Yeah. So we can make these more emotionally based decisions and not necessarily bring in logic or structure and process and strategy, right? So when we're thinking about this, I want you to then think about how can we, for those of us in the room or for those of you who have a male brain and you're thinking about those who have a female brain, how can we set up intentional blinders so that we can assure ourselves that we won't be making decisions around our strengths where they would get the best of us? How can we set up those blinders? What are some ideas? What are some resources? Say that again? Having a conscious mind. Can you tell me more about that? Beautiful. So be conscious and aware of the things that can get under your skin. She used the word trigger you, that can just rattle you. Like, what are the things that set you off? Good. Bring awareness to that. Anyone else? Yes. Creating focused micro goals. Yes, it's a way to help us not get into that multitasking that can spin anyone off, not just people who have female brains. Very good. Yes. Evaluate priorities. Yes, identify and stick to them, right? And I love saying, I'm going to add to that, not just getting clear what the priorities are, but the order of them. I find we were like, oh yeah, I have these priorities. And then you realize you have 6 in category 1. You're like, how do I commit to that, right? Anyway, great. So with some of these blinders in mind, if any of this conversation, by the way, is of interest to you and you're like, okay, yeah, that makes sense, but I don't know if I can actually like do that. Take time, slow down to think about how could you intentionally put some blinders in so that you can play to your strengths and not let them get the best of you, right? More so, to end the point for our first fast break, is I find that if we can build awareness not just to how we are wired, those of us that have female brains, but also build an awareness to how male brains are wired, then we can identify how we complement and can enhance each other and our capabilities, both individually and collectively. So my question that I want to leave you with to think about for yourself is, how can you create and cultivate relationships with not just other female brains, but male brains that can enhance your capabilities and bring more resource to the table, right? In addition, for the female leaders in the room, there is an art to how, and not a structured way, an art, I say that on purpose, to how you can master the ability to not just bring your skills to the table, but not do it passively. We're so used to doing things passively, like kind of just fitting in between and taking care, make sure people are taken care of. And we don't even realize we're doing it passively. There's a way to do it actively, where we can actually help people see the value we are bringing, and it creates a seat at the table where we didn't just create it, they asked for it, and we get to sustain it. Okay, next. That's the 10-minute break for today.
Thank you, Jenna, for walking us through that exercise, and appreciate all the women leaders in the room. But I also want to take a moment to acknowledge all the men leaders in the room as well here. So thank you all for joining us. Now we're going to hear from our first panel, and that's Women on Boards. Please join me in welcoming our moderator, Heather Spilsbury, CEO of 50/50 Women on Boards.
I can just do this. I think this is fine. What a great room. Thank you for having me this morning. And thank you, Lupita. It's a privilege for me to moderate this panel, as this topic holds personal significance to me and also at our mission for 50/50 Women on Boards. I'm delighted to welcome this panel today, who are incredible women who have served on numerous boards and have an incredible track record in terms of their careers. So if you want to take a look at their bios in detail, you can find them in the program. But why don't you help me introduce and welcome Nadine Watt from Watt Capital Partners. Hi, Nadine. Renata Simrel from LA84 Foundation. Woo! And Cynthia Guerrera, partner at California Strategies. Welcome. Hi, Renata.
Oh, she gets a table. Like it.
And she wore the tennis shoes.
If you don't have a seat at the table, bring one of your own.
Yeah, making things happen. I love it. I love it.
And comfortable shoes.
Well, great. Well, thank you for being with us today to be part of this panel. It's such an important topic, not only for me, but I know for all of you and also for everybody in the room. As we heard earlier, it's really important to start early in your career. So why don't we dive right in with the first question? Can each of you share your path to the boardroom? I know you all have unique stories, so I'd love to hear from all of you.
Fortunately, I am in a family business. I'm the third generation in a real estate development company. So my path to the boardroom had a lot of open doors. I was in another business. I was in the film business for many years before that. But when that started to fall apart, my family said, why don't you come back? And even if you're Sherry Lansing one day running Paramount Studios, we want you to know how to run our family business and make sure no one's cheating you. So I committed to stay with the company for 2 years, and now I'm 22 years later. So I guess it stuck. Fortunately, through my path of learning and becoming CEO finally of our family business, some doors opened. The first board that I joined was a bank board, and it was a public company. My father was on a different bank board and suggested that when this opportunity arose that I take it. His number one piece of advice, though, was don't join the audit committee. Sorry, Wendy. So I joined, and I was on the compensation and governance committees. But when I walked in the first day of this board meeting with Joanne Cosberg, as a matter of fact, I did not know the first thing about being on a bank board. And I thought, this is a huge mistake. What have I done? I don't know anything about banking. I don't know anything about regulation. I don't know anything. What I did know was about real estate. And they had a lot of loans and a lot of real estate related loans. And so there was certainly an area that I could offer my skill set to that board. And then the rest sort of came along. I learned on the job, as we say. So I would say, don't be afraid to learn on the job, and don't say no just because you don't think that you know everything that there is to know when you step in the door. Don't be afraid to learn. So that was my first opportunity.
That's great advice. I think that's important not only for boardrooms, but also for your career. Remember to take the interview, take the call. You never know what it's going to end up being. And it might be an opportunity that takes you to a different path, but it's always good to have the conversation and never turn anything down. Renata, do you want to share your story?
I do, but I think it's important because I know we have some young college students. How many college students do we have in the audience? Okay, they're in the back. So young college students. I am my ancestors' greatest imagination. By extraordinary odds and by the grace of God, I sit before you today. I come from very humble beginnings. My mother was a grocery clerk. My stepdad was a butcher. I never knew my father. I have a connection to CSUN because when I did find my journey to my father, he has 2 degrees from CSUN, and I have his dissertation from his master's degree, and is a prized possession of mine. So thank you to CSUN. And so my journey is, you can tap that up. So my journey is one of hard work, overcoming barriers, overcoming obstacles. And it's interesting that I run the legacy of the 1984 Olympic Games because sports was transformative to me. Did want to be a professional athlete, chose an expensive sport. So my career ended up in high school. And to find money for college, I ended up joining the Army. And that was a transformative experience as well, because for a story of another time, I ended up becoming a military police officer. And so I was thrust into a very male-dominated environment that I had to use my left brain and my right brain to sort of navigate being a Black woman, being a woman in the Deep South. I did my basic training in Anniston, Alabama. And then I was stationed overseas. And so that formative experience really helped me navigate and have experience navigating a variety of environments. But it was always that hard work ethic to take advantage of every opportunity and to, at a very young age, have this sense, despite feeling different as a woman of color, that I had this, I don't even know how to explain it, this sense that I belonged in every room I was in. I might not have felt that internally all the time, but when I showed up, that I just had this sense that I belong in that room. And my journey to a publicly traded board started with nonprofit board service. And a cadre of very good mentors who shared with me that it's about your brand and the brand that you leave for the network that speaks about you when you're not in the room. And so it was really that experience at a young age, and then having this extraordinary experience out of college working for a city councilman, helping to rebuild South LA after the civil unrest, that people would ask me if I would want to serve on boards. And it started with nonprofit boards. And I would just listen and observe. And then I have, it's a question later, but Linda Griego is a dear friend and a mentor of mine who's a trailblazer in serving on corporate boards and gave me some advice. And one of the pieces of advice she gave me was, be on the audit committee.
Yes.
Because publicly traded nonprofit boards might be about, the cause or the mission, but publicly traded boards, if that's a goal of yours, is all about finance. And particularly in this day and age, it's about Sarbanes-Oxley, and they're heavily regulated. So your financial statements, being on the audit committee, that's really important. And I didn't have that expertise because I didn't have a finance background. And so being intentional about understanding finance, being on an audit committee, being in leadership on nonprofit boards. After a few years, I ended up getting on my university board, started on the Alumni Association board, moved up to the Black Alumni Association, moved up to the Alumni Association, and I was on the Board of Regents, and then became chair of that board. And so it's those progressions throughout your nonprofit service that makes you ready to serve on nonprofit boards. And the last thing I'll say, to serve on for-profit boards. And then the last thing in terms of networks and people speaking about you in other rooms, the board that I sit on now is Modus Link, which is a third-party logistics company knitting fulfillment services global in its space. I don't have experience in that space, but they were going through a take-private transaction, and a colleague that I'd worked with serves on the parent board of this company and mentioned my name to the CEO as someone who shows up, that speaks up, that has transaction experience. And it's ultimately because of that network that I got my first publicly traded board.
It's great. I love that story. Cynthia?
Well, one thing is this is an incredible panel to be on, and I feel very humbled to share the stage with these three incredible women here. So when I initially was asked to be on this panel, I thought to myself, why? What have I done? And I think it goes back to the point Michelle made earlier, that it's sometimes we question ourselves, and then we become our own worst enemies, our own business, worst obstacles. And we're going to talk about, I know, landmines a little bit later, possibly. But in terms of just my trajectory, first of all, I want to say that it, in very similar to Renata, it's dream. Just think about what you want to do. If the sky's the limit, what would it be? What would that look like? And that literally is what my career became. And I think one of the things is, growing up in a Latino household, it was always frowned upon for me to be maybe a little bit too aggressive. It's always well, don't walk in with those sharp elbows. Don't be fiery. You better calm down that fire. And so, but I realized is that tenacity and the resilience of falling down on my face so much is exactly why I got to where I am. And so in terms of just my board trajectory, and I think you're going to notice that there's a common denominator with a lot of us here, is that there's the trajectory of serving on nonprofit boards, which teaches you certain skills in organization. We have fiduciary responsibilities as board members, not only as nonprofit board members, but as corporate board members. We also have, learning the actual structure of the organization. It's interesting about the audit committee, because I too, Renata, was told, gravitate towards that audit committee. And I said, why would I want to go to the audit committee? But I have one of the committees that I've really always liked is nomination and governance. Why? It's the power to pull other people in with you. And also, it's the power to shift the dynamics within that board. And so really nomination and governance. Like I said, I came through the pathway of nonprofits. Actually, it was a path before that. And there are some people in this room, colleagues of mine, that I've grown up with when we were San Fernando Valley Young Democrats. So if anybody who's a San Fernando Valley Young Democrat, some hopefully in the room, okay. That's where I actually started, and being, you might not think about it, but student government is so important. Student government teaches you the ins and outs of how you need to like run a group and be a leader, be a good manager. And so I would attribute it going all the way back then eventually being vice president of the California Democrats. And then I started getting on nonprofit boards. And initially, when I finished my master's at Pepperdine University, I too got on the alumni board, the Alumni Leadership Council. And again, consistent like my colleagues here, we all sit on our alma mater boards. And so that really, I think, was the turning point where I thought to myself, okay, this is a big deal here. You know, you're on your university board, and then you start interacting with, with a different type of network. And I feel like there's that really, I would say, was the biggest turning point, growing in terms of like gaining more experience on nonprofit boards. And my background started in the securities industry. I kind of actually, I got my degree in political science, but I made a pivot into the financial services industry. And it wasn't planned. I'm very much like my career trajectory was like Forrest Gump, like right place at right time. I just took the opportunity that came to me. And I remember being at Mount St. Mary's University, there was a job board, and I said, oh my gosh, why did I wait till the last minute to find a job for this summer? And there was one job posting at a securities firm in Beverly Hills. And this, our career counselor, who was in a full habit, she said, Cynthia, of course you waited until the last minute. And I said, I know. She said, well, you don't have a finance background, so don't bother. And I said, well, I'm going to go give it a shot. And I walked into this boutique Beverly Hills firm, and I ended up landing the job. And that started my career in finance. And after that, my trajectory grew to work for Barclays Global Investors, which was one of the largest asset managers in the world, and Credit Suisse First Boston Technology Group, one of the top technology investment banking groups in the world. And so I think that finance background, and in terms of parlaying it into what I do now, representing technology companies, I'm a technology veteran of 25 years. So managing regulatory risk for technology companies, and I became a technology evangelist. That's more of just like what I probably call it. But, fast forward, I'm now sitting on a corporate board for an AI company. So that's kind of like the gist. But I think, like I said, I share similar experiences to my colleagues here on the panel.
That's great. I would agree that everybody wants you to serve on the audit committee, so if you can, do it. That's a superpower, though. So I agree with you, Nadine. It's not where I'd first go. But the NomGov thing is very interesting because that's from our research, too, at 50/50 Women on Boards. When women are in leadership and they're either serving as CEO or NomGov chair or chair of the board tends to be more diverse, which means women are bringing diversity with them. So if you can serve on the NomGov committee, you do have a great responsibility to ensure that that board does reflect diversity, does have not only from a racial and ethnic background, but also, diversity in experience and expertise and even sex. So it's important to include and encourage and recommend. And I think that becomes difficult for boards when they're looking at succession planning. So it's a great place to be when you're serving on a board as well. And that kind of segues into the next question in terms of industry expertise. What industry expertise do you all feel is necessary to serve on a board?
Well, I think, like I said, you don't have to be an expert when you first step in. Don't be afraid to learn on the job. I think that's key because I've served on a bank board. I've served on a home building board, which I did know a little bit more about. I've served on an automotive company board, which I did not know anything about, and also on a data, technology board. So I think what Renata and Cynthia were saying about having served on nonprofit boards is important because you do learn the rules. You learn about Robert's Rules of Order. You learn about committees. You learn about fiduciary responsibility. So having all of that by starting on a nonprofit gives you such a solid background. And I love that it started with student government, so that stint as senior class president actually did matter. So think about those kinds of things as you are going onto a board. Again, don't feel like you have to know it all already before you step foot in the door, especially what it's about per se. I mean, I felt like I needed a bank boards for dummies or something, but that doesn't exist. But you pick up, if you're being asked to be on the board, they see something in you as well. And I love that men never really question that. They never think, oh, why are they asking me? Whereas we as women are like, wait, do we really deserve this? Do we deserve this seat at the table? Am I sure I know everything? Just that different right brain, left brain. Men just go in and they own it. And I think that's something that you can do when you walk into your first boardroom. Own it, whether you know every single thing about it or not. Just have that self-confidence and own it.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I would say, though, that you don't have to have industry expertise. I wasn't a third-party logistics expertise, but I think it helps to have expertise in a particular publicly traded board, in particular that you're serving on. And my expertise in terms of how I got appointed to my first publicly traded board, as I mentioned, it was a publicly traded board where the CEO owned a large amount of stock and wanted to take the company private. And so it was a transaction. And through my experience in real estate, that I had really good transaction experience. And then also had served in some leadership capacities that the CEO and the nominating governance committee felt that I had, expertise. But I think it was Michelle that said it earlier this morning, I think for those who are thinking of publicly traded boards in particular, which I would recommend because we as women, there's a thing called stock and compensation. You actually get paid to be on corporate boards. A lot of people don't know that. And so when you think about long-term wealth and equity building, it is certainly an excellent avenue for that. But the point that I was going to make is that it's work. It's not just showing up and saying, oh, I can clip a coupon and I get payment every quarter. Particularly on publicly traded boards that are highly regulated, right? So you have to put the work in to understand the industry, to understand the regulations, and certainly the work that I was doing on a transaction, then I got put on a special committee, which is a whole nother issue because you've got your board responsibilities and your special committee responsibilities in terms of making sure, and I won't go into all the details, but it was a lot of work for the 2 years I was on this board that I knew it was going to be work, but it was actually twice as much work as I anticipated. And so you have to be really prepared to put in the work if you aren't an industry expertise. I think finance is a fundamental baseline that you have to have a knowledge of understanding how to read financials, understanding the audit, because that is a backbone of the company and you as a publicly traded board, there's more personal liability and risk to you in terms of taking votes and making decisions. So no, you don't necessarily need to have industry expertise, but it would be helpful. And then the other finance, and then having something that you can contribute to the board that they might need. The last thing that I'll say is that, and I think it's to Nadine's point, you don't have to know everything because the job of a board is not to run the company. It is to help set strategy and help to advise the CEO on issues that pertain to that particular company or industry. And so just being mindful of that as you navigate your journeys are important.
So one of the things I know that we haven't brought up yet is serving on private company boards, which I think definitely work a little bit different than publicly traded boards. But I think when people think about corporate boards, they like what people know of, it's like generally, oh, a corporate board means for a publicly traded company. Private company boards have very similar dynamics, but one of the things that I found is that they do require a certain level of industry expertise. I would say probably more than a publicly traded board in many ways, because a publicly traded board, to Renata and Nadine's point, is that there's a skill set you have and a background that fits into what they need. Whereas I find that in private company boards, and I would have to disagree with you, Renata, private boards are really high maintenance. This is a really big thing is knowing when you're, and came from, so I'm also part of Latino Corporate Directors Association, and I know Monica, one of our stars, is also, and it's one of the things that I would learn from another member who serves on a publicly traded board is, she said, look, know when to say no. When your dance card is full, it's full. Don't think that you could take on more, because that is a huge responsibility. It's a company. There are consequences to failure. And so it's being mindful of your time. So I absolutely agree with both of you on that. But this private company board I serve on, we meet every month. I feel like I'm in a relationship with these people. And so, and even we meet every month, but that doesn't even exclude the communication I get from them every other day. And then I have a job. And so I think that has been, I think, one of the biggest surprises, but I'm taking it on. But I think in terms of my background, obviously in AI, and so it happens to be an AI company. Okay, that makes sense. And then also my banking background parlayed into that, working 6-7 years in the industry and technology banking. And so obviously we're going to look at strategies in terms of like go to market and how we exit and all of these things that really could be quickly a race to the top or a race to the bottom, depending on where you are with this company. One of the things I did want to mention is in terms of experience, a lot of times people dismiss advisory roles. And advisory roles, other than just a nonprofit, could serve as a stepping stone. So I know that some people in this room are advising. That is a skill. And so when you start advising, you're advising then companies. And then you're on their quote board of advisors. And then you're advising their C-suite and their board. And then a board seat opens up, and then you're gonna plant yourself in there. So if you're visible to them, they're gonna see, this is the person that we're gonna be bringing in. And so I think it's just placing also to yourselves in positions where it's like, oh, it's not a board, like a board of directors role, I'm not interested. If it's an advisory role for like a Series B company, go for it. So that would be my advice.
Yeah, that's all great. I think, listening to all of you, I think nonprofit, whether it's nonprofit, private, or public, I think there is a lot of work involved, no matter which board you decide to serve on. And it does matter, and you should be intentional about that search, because you do have a responsibility to the organization or the company. And so there is work behind it, where you're less operational on a public company board than a private or a nonprofit. There's a lot of reading. You have to really like the company. You have to really like the topic.
I would say that there is the same amount of operational role, whether or not it's a public board, a private board, or a nonprofit board. And one of my mantras, my board member Wendy Gruhl is here, is you want to have nose in and fingers out.
Yes.
It is not the board of directors' responsibility to operate the company. And I think that when you come into a role in that way, that it's a better relationship between you and the CEO, and understanding your role as a board member is a duty of loyalty and a duty of care. Hire and fire the CEO, the strategic direction of the company, and governance. Those are the three main functions of a board, and managing risk.
Right. Yeah, agreed. Before we get to the difference between nonprofit and why more women serve on nonprofits, I wanted to ask each of you if you could elaborate on your unique strengths and what you bring to a board, and potentially what others can bring to a board too. I know that we talked a little bit about industry expertise, and I think there are some buckets that make you more attractive to boards because they are looking for P&L experience, tech experience, cybersecurity, AI, et cetera. So if you want to speak to your unique experience, I think that'd be great.
I think if you're a president or in the C-suite running your own company, you have a certain expertise in finance, and balance sheet, how to read a profit and loss statement. You have a certain skill set that comes with your experience finally getting that C-suite role. So bringing that is a skill set that you have to have. I think if you've had leadership roles in nonprofit organizations, or as your university alumni leader, or any leader you've had in another nonprofit. I was the chair of the Los Angeles Business Council for 7 years, which, sort of like VICA, brought public-private partnerships together to advocate for our community and for our city. And I think if you're a leader in a civic role, that adds to your skill set. If you're a leader in your nonprofit, even if you're a leader in your church or your synagogue or whatever religious affiliation you have, that skill set is unique and is additive to your role as a board member or board leader. I think one of the things that you guys suggest that you bring to the table is, make sure your resume is polished and your LinkedIn is in good standing, and your Instagram isn't posting you in compromising positions, or all those things we tell students now, that you have to make sure that you have a professional polish and that you carry yourself in a manner that would be befitting of a board member. So those things that you might not think about that matter, and definitely reflect on your persona and what you're presenting out there and how you represent yourself.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with Nadine in terms of being a CEO. You bring a set of core competencies to nonprofit, private, and publicly traded boards. I mentioned my journey to my first board was because of my transaction experience. But I'd say that my fundamental superpower is curiosity, is that I'm just very curious. And that curiosity, allows me to ask questions in a non-threatening, way. And I say non-threatening because there's a dynamic in the boardroom, in terms of when to speak up, how to speak up, how to guide the conversation, particularly if you're new to a particular board and you may bring imposter syndrome. Well, I'm not an industry expert. I don't want to sound stupid when I ask a question. So how do I ask that question in a way that is, I'm new to a corporate board and I notice on so and so and so, can you explain to me how? So there's a certain nuance in terms of how you bring that curiosity to the boardroom. And what I find in the board experiences that I've had is that many other board members have the same question, but are afraid to ask the question. And it gives permission for others then to lean in. And I find that curiosity is a superpower that I've brought to my board experiences, that I just offer that to the audience.
Nadine, you brought up a point about the LinkedIn. So I was told by my colleague, who's the CEO of Latino Corporate Directors Association, when he met me, he said, "You have the worst LinkedIn page I've ever seen in my life. How are you ever going to position yourself for anything?" Well, A, the LinkedIn page is still looking the same. B, I have gone onto a corporate board. So but a lot of it, there was a lot more that went into actually, obviously getting, starting my trajectory on corporate board service. But like I said, a lot of it, just like what my colleagues mentioned, is obviously that there's like certain core competencies, but a lot of times it's just, there's also two things about your person. And I know we could talk about like how like it's different in terms of how women lead versus how men lead, is there's this accountability factor also too that women bring, and we're also too more naturally, like I would say, empathetic. And so it's that I think is not really associated with these other, per se, like skill sets in terms of corporate board service, which I think it is important. And every board is very, very different in terms of what they're looking for. But I think that there's obviously certain ways that maybe you could set yourself apart. So again, just echoing a lot of the sentiments that already been said.
So tell me one thing. Have you ever been one and only in the boardroom? And if so, what is that like, and how do you navigate that? Because we talk about this a lot. You have to have 3 or more to have a cohort, to have a voice, right? So if you're the first, how do you navigate that, and how do you position yourself to be heard, especially when you're curious? And it's a different dynamic. Curious, go first.
No, I laugh because I mean, oftentimes I actually, the board that I was on, there were 2 women. And she ended up getting asked not to, so now I'm the sole woman on the board. But it's interesting because as we have these conversations about nominating governance, it's as if there's only one spot for a woman, there's only one spot for a person of color. And so the board that I'm on, I check both boxes. So I'm like the only one. And it's as where you have a board with all white men, Why is that not okay? And I think to your point earlier, it's really having persons of color, women on the nominating and governance to make sure that you're bringing through, more diversity on the board, because I think that it makes a more robust conversation. But for me, I don't let that be a barrier. That I feel that I have a responsibility when I sit on nonprofit boards or publicly traded boards to be a representative for women and women of color, is to show them that we are badass, that we're smart, that we can contribute to a company, so that as we are looking to bring on new board members, is that I am a reflection of what's possible for everyone in this room. And so I would just encourage all of you who are on nonprofit boards, your school boards, your kids' boards, school boards, or if you're on a publicly traded company, is don't be afraid to speak up. That obviously means doing your homework to make sure that you're speaking up in the right way, that you're guiding the company, that you're maintaining the responsibilities, the fiduciary responsibilities you have to the board, but don't be afraid to speak up. And again, I find in the board settings that I've been in, is that when I speak up, it gives permission for other people to do the same. The men don't know, 9 times out of 10 don't know any more than we do. But if there's a list of 10 things that you're supposed to know and men have 2, that women feel we have to have all 10. Don't, just think, as I'm planning for my board meetings, I might look at a board agenda or docket and go through it and say, I have nothing to contribute today, so I'm gonna be quiet today, and that's okay. But I might say, you know what, I have 2 or 3 questions that I want to ask, and I'm very strategic when I go in, that I'm not stepping outside my lane, and it might be a curious question, it might be a direct question, it might be, a directional issue that I have a perspective on, that they should go in path A and not path B. So I think just being strategic about how you show up, when you show up, but make sure that you show up because it's important.
I have been often the only woman in the room being on corporate board, nonprofit or a public board. The first thing I do is look for an ally who, it's a male ally, obviously, who will support me and support my vision to bring on someone else, right? Be it another woman or another person of color or another person of diversity in the room. So you do have to find 1 or 2 other people who join you in that support. So you kind of have to make friends, and put your agenda forth in a very subtle, not an overt way, in order to get more diversity on your board. It's if you're alone, you're the first starter, first mover. You have to build a coalition, and you have to get people to join with you on that ride. That would be what I would suggest.
So similarly in experiences to Nadine and Renata is that currently the corporate board I just onboarded on, I'm the only female. And of the executive team, that's me include, I don't even include myself, but including the executive team, no females. There's nothing there. And I find it's like the dynamic is very interesting. I do feel very lonely at times. It kind of flashes me back to when I started in the securities industry when there was one other female in the group of like 40. And again, that's going back to the point I made earlier when I was introducing myself is, you start like maybe second guessing yourself, but before you start going down that hole, you have to catch yourself and think it's like, well, what can I do to change the circumstance? And I identified in a very strategic manner. As Nadine mentioned, you identify people who are going to be an ally, your buddy, your friend, who's going to see the importance of diversity in the room. In terms of women, obviously, it's very easy to make the argument as to why more women need to be in a corporate boardroom. Where, as Michelle mentioned earlier, the companies perform better. It's like a business case as to why more women, more diversity needs to be in the room. We're looking at, more return on sales. more return on investment capital. So why wouldn't we? And so I think what it is finding the right time and place to make those changes. Obviously, you know, companies and nonprofit boards have the organizational infrastructure through a nom and gov committee to do it in a way that is diplomatic in terms of making a case. And again, I do agree is like speaking up is important. But usually my rule is not on the first day. Like the first day I go in and I'm listening and watching. The second day I might say something. And I think what it is because I'm scoping out what the situation in the room is before I step into something that I don't know. And, you know, just again, observing and listening, I think sometimes is actually a very powerful trait. So anyways, I encourage that.
And where are we now with the law that you have to have one or more women on your board?
Well, in California, the law was shut down.
It was shut down
last year, so it's in appeals.
So that's
right
why
now.
there's still sometimes only one of us.
But California still leads with the most women on boards with 34%.
And shout out to Betsy Berkmer-Clayton and Renee Frazier for their courage, because it shows that when corporations are held accountable, that they do make inroads, and certainly the data in terms of companies performing better with women, with diversity on the board, is just fact.
Yeah, it's in the data. The Russell 1000 have the most diverse boards, so those were the largest market share. So it's proof. So we always call it a business imperative. So I know we're hearing a lot about the backlash on DE&I and ESG, and those are things that you kind of have to go, okay, that's happening, but let's consider the business imperative of what this is. It's a business decision. It means your company's going to be more profitable and productive. And so when you look at it through that lens, all those other things that they've sort of trapped us in, you can kind of move away from that and say, this is what we're focusing on. So for a business, it makes sense. I love what you said about observing what happens in the room too, because I feel like when you do get selected for a board seat and you're a board of directors, when you walk into that first meeting, it's almost as if you're walking into a conversation that's already happening. Yeah. So you have to sort of take a step back and digest and understand how everyone operates in the room and the dynamics and the culture. And you were selected for a reason, because they not only like your experience, but you also fit with the culture of the organization and what you're going to bring to the table. So I think that's
and because you're
powerful.
The best person for the job,
right.
Not because you're a woman or a diverse candidate, because you are the best person for the job, and that's really important too.
And I think that just makes me think about the board dynamics in the boardroom. It is relationships, and I think it's really important for me as a woman of color. From humble beginnings, I sit in an environment of people that I wouldn't normally have a relationship with. And I talked about, being in Alabama, being in Europe when I was in the service, right? That perspective allows me to bridge relationships within the boardroom. Because this transaction that I did, we closed 2 years ago, but I spent a lot of time with my board colleagues. And so I think developing those relationships, finding allies, but really finding connections amongst your board colleagues is really important. And then I also share that there were other board opportunities that I had. And when I went through the nominating governance process and interviewed, no disrespect to my banking colleagues in the room, it was boring to me. I didn't have a connection with the board. And so while I desperately wanted to be on a publicly traded board, I said no to 3 or 4 opportunities because it didn't seem like a good fit for me. So I think relationships, being able to bridge divisions, finding common bond, and that relationship in the boardroom is critically important, above and beyond, what expertise you bring to the particular company that you might be considering.
And to be honest, most of the time they don't expect you to open your mouth anyways. To be, very, very honest.
The expectation is low.
The expectation is low. They sometimes think that you're going to sit there and smile. Sure, I'm going to smile today, but maybe not the next time. I'm going to be opening my mouth and not just smiling. So it just not a lot is expected. The first
It's so funny. When I was doing my interview for my corporate board and I was asking questions and I started asking about their EBITDA trends, it's like the board member looked at me saying, "The hell do you know about EBITDA?"
Love it. Once you're appointed to a board, what actions do you consider most crucial for making a meaningful impact?
Speak only if it improves the silence.
I listen to so many people, and I want to say men because I'm usually the only woman, who like to hear themselves talk. And they're not additive at all. Or that question was already answered, and they just want to, try to say that they're adding value. But there is no value when the question's already been asked and answered.
Or they'll mansplain.
Yeah,
to say what you just said and then seem like a hero. No disrespect to our male colleagues in the room.
You ask, and then later on they repeat what you just actually said. I'm like,
or if I say it and then they repeat it, like it only gets heard if they said it, not when I said it. And that happens to Wendy and I all the time.
But we love our male allies in the room. It's everybody else but you.
I would say one big thing is just, if you're going to join a board, and again, because of the responsibilities, just make sure you're just prepared for your meetings. Like I said, I'm drinking out of a fire hose right now with these like monthly board meetings, which that's not what was told to me, but I'm like, okay, I'll go with it. But it's being prepared. And one of my mentors, Dolores Kunda, who is in Illinois, one day I went over her place, and she started on various public boards, all these giant binders. And I'm like, what the holy hell is that? And she's like, I'm preparing for my board meetings, and I'm like, that's what I have to do. And she's like, yes, that's what you have to do. And so just be prepared, read your material, and also too, come in with thoughtful questions. Because those really thought-provoking questions are the ones where people look at that, you as a board member, and say, I like her. And so just prepare.
Because she asks curious and thoughtful questions.
Right. Or before somebody takes it over and claims it as their own.
As their own,
Yeah.
How are we doing on time? We need to wrap it up. Oh, wow, this has been a great conversation. We didn't get to half the questions, but I have enjoyed the discussion so much. Before we close, I just wanted to ask, because I think this is important, if you can share any notable failures or successes from your board experience that have left you a lasting impression on you. And I think, we talk about failures a lot, and I always say that my career is called failing up. You learn as you go, and like you said before, there are things that you're gonna do that lead you in a different direction. So would love to hear those last thoughts from all of you before we close.
We don't think about our failures now. Forget it.
Well, one thing before we close, because I'm trying to build up my social media, is follow me on Renata Angelino. So at Renata Angelino. The closed mouth does not get fed, my grandmother said. I don't see it as failures. I think it's just opportunities to be prepared. So I was thinking about this question last night, and I don't know, as it relates to corporate boards, I've been kind of lucky so far. I think the issue of time, if I wasn't in the position that I was in as a CEO with a good team, they said it was a lot of work, and then I ended up getting on a special committee, plus you're on a regular committee. So the first 2 years of my board were a lot of time, long nights. And so I think just making sure that it's not a failure, but I think just a preview for those who are thinking about corporate boards is to make sure that you're in a position in your business life or your personal life that you have time to commit, because it was, long nights, my husband missing dinners and those types of things. So I don't know that was necessarily a failure, but it was an underestimation of the work that was required to be on a board and to really lean into your fiduciary responsibilities.
Yeah, and the end of the journey is not just getting on the board, right? You have to understand that it continues on once you get there. You might think you're result oriented and, I finally made it, I'm on this board. No, that sometimes, and when the company isn't doing so well, you could actually have daily meetings as opposed to monthly, or it adds yeah. So it's not necessarily a failure on the board's part either. It can be circumstantial. There can be a lot of reasons for failure. But again, the journey is part of it, right? Like take it all in and be curious about it all.
Well, not to specific failures in terms of board service, but one of the things just in general I would like to say is we all fail. It's part of life. And I've learned the most as a professional, as a person, from my failures. And if you don't try, then you don't succeed. It's okay to fail, learn from that experience, and move forward. Okay, we're wrapping it up, Stu.
We are
I know you're
wrapping it up.
telling me to
Thank
be
you so
quiet.
much for having
Thank you.
me
Please give
today,
him a round of
having all
applause.
of us.
Thank you.
Wow, that was abrupt. Thank you. With my water.
Is it on? Oh, great. So we are going to have another fast break. So let me help me welcome back to the stage the incredible Jenna Dillon.
Hi again. This is our date number 2. Okay, so we're going to be talking about, it's very different than the first fast break. We're going to be talking about the multi-generations in the workforce. And I think everybody here can agree in the last 5 years, we've had a lot of change in the work environment, but we could even look at the last 20 years, and there's been a lot of change in the work environment and what the work environment today really looks like. If we look at the 20 years before that, it wasn't as much change, right? So when we're taking into consideration the multi-generations in the workforce right now, the work environment is in this J curve of change, and that's not going anywhere. I think we all know that. But the reason why I bring that up is because this conversation is actually not just important to consider, we're now at a point where it's necessary to consider. So I've worked with, I'll say like, I've worked with a company called, you probably know it, the YMCA, and they are one of those organizations that has not 3, not 4, but 5 generations of employees on staff. That's a big something to swallow, right? And so no matter how many generations you have in your work environment, at your organization, or even boards in that organization that you're a part of that board for, one question that I want to start posing to everybody in the room is, what do you see are the key ingredients to have a successful work environment where all of the generations can coexist successfully together? What would you say one of those key ingredients are? Respect. Yes, absolutely. Communication and understanding. Beautiful. Ooh, what? Flexibility. Ooh, ability to have ownership and contribute. I heard trust. Yes. What else we got? Transparency. Beautiful. Inclusion. Let's see if we have a couple more. And as we're actually listing these out, I want you to kind of take an inventory of them for yourself in your current organizations that you're a part of which ones are you checking off the list, right? Or which ones are like, oh, that's right, I didn't think about that. Let's have a couple more key ingredients. What do we see would make a thriving work environment with all the generations? Being open to learn from each other. Excellent, yeah. Yeah, a couple more to add to the list. Humility on all of them, all the generations, not just like the young ones or the older ones, right? All of them. Humility. Another one that I'll contribute is adaptability. I know we said flexibility, it's subtly different, but adaptability and perseverance. Now, why would I say perseverance? Well, when you're looking from even an HR perspective, there's been studies that, and we could we could really talk about this one, but I'll just briefly mention it. There's been studies that have shown when you start hiring specific archetypes or profiles of people to work together collectively in a team where they're similar, so they're going to get along. One, it can increase in some ways productivity. However, it doesn't bring in innovation. So it actually can then long-term affect your productivity of problem solving and being adaptable for the change that comes in the work environment, right? So with that being said, taking into these key ingredients that we have mentioned today, what are new ways or unique and respected ways that either you've seen that a leader has done well to help emulate this in the culture, or you've seen an organization take some specific unique stride in creating this work environment? Feedback, like being able to give feedback to one another. Great. Lead by example. Can you talk more about that? I'm gonna give you the mic.
Yes, okay.
Go ahead, you got it.
I think everything trickles from the top down. So if it's morality or morale or being adaptable or flexible, it's got to start at the top, because you have to show yourself in order to be able to have the people under you be able to emulate what you bring to the table.
Yeah, beautifully said. What's been an example that someone has seen a leader model to have that ripple effect? What's a specific action or behavior or initiative that they've done? I'm very comfortable with silence as the wheels are turning. Yes. Yeah.
I think it's important for each age group to feel like they're fairly represented. So they need like cross advocacy and representation of each of the groups.
Yeah. So to have that, thank you, Jane, to have that cross advocacy for all of these groups being represented or all of these generations being represented, how can we do that? Like, how can we actively do that? And so one of the things that I wanted to do that's different about this fast break than the one you saw me earlier is I actually want you to take some time to think about a question I'm going to pose to you. So we are going to have more silence in the room. And one thing that I'm a stickler about, because it's my job, is we're not just going to talk about things and then no action. Like when I'm working with my clients, you're not my client. But on that note, for you to actually take something away today for yourself, I would encourage you to not just think about this for the minute I'll give you to think about it, but be intentional to write it down. Now, I realize we might not have a paper and writing utensil. So if you're going to pull out your phone, do yourself a service and not look at your notifications, okay? Like, just pull out your phone, look at a note, and write this down. So my question that I want to pose to you is, what are 3 small things that you could change in your day-to-day or week-to-week routine that would help cultivate and foster a working environment where all generations could be working well together? I'll say that again. And it's a big question. What are 3 small changes you could take in your day-to-day, week-to-week routine that would help cultivate and foster a working environment where all generations could coexist successfully? I'll say it again, 3rd time's a charm. What are 3 small changes you could make in your day-to-day or week-to-week routine where all generations could coexist successfully together?
Time management.
Tell me more. Time management. What would be the small change time management wise? Okay, creating a schedule to balance the work life and the personal life. Okay. Yes.
Lisa shared a really good one. She said, create a safe environment.
Yeah, beautiful. Creating a safe environment. The technical term that we here in the workforce, you've probably heard it at various conferences, is psychological safety and building trust. Yes. Yeah, create an environment where different generations are learning from each other, learning about each other, working together in a downtime. Yep, wonderful. Yes.
Thank you so much, Jenna. This has been wonderful.
Great.
And thank you all for participating. What a great opportunity for... Thank you for this quick and fast break and for allowing us to be adaptable and flexible as we get into the next part of our program. And one more round of applause for the last panel, because it was so phenomenal to have these amazing women share their journey and their tips, and I'm a fan of all of them, so thank you. It's my pleasure to introduce our next moderator, and that's the Honorable Wendy Gruhl, who is executive in residence at the CSUN Nazarian College of Business and Economics. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Monica.
Thank you. And we saved the best for last. No disrespect to the others, but we have saved the best for last. And so happy to be here with Monica Lozano, who has a very long resume, which you can see in the program. But Monica, I don't know if I've ever told you this, but when I, in my young self in the 80s, I met Monica through Deputy Mayor Grace Montañez Davis. And I was like, that's Monica Lozano, and followed her career over the years and feel so happy to be a partner with her in many things and a friend. But as you know, when you think about corporate boards, Monica is like the woman. She serves on some of the biggest boards and has, she currently serves on Apple, Target, and Bank of America. And those are, yeah, that's impressive. And then she's the co-founder of the Aspen Institute Latino Society and former president and CEO of the College Futures Foundation, served on the board of UC Regents, and also serves as the chair of the Weingart Foundation and many, many other things. But we're going to spend a little bit of time. We promised to keep you on time here this morning, but this is really a dialogue and conversation. And so you've had so many different positions in your career. There's no linear kind of pathway in that. Is there kind of a common thread you've had through your career? And when you went to college, did you know that this was what you're going to do? There you go.
Thank you, Wendy. And it's so great to be here. And I love the panel that came before me and the round robin that we just did. And Wendy, you know, I'm such a fan of yours and Lupita and everybody associated with VICA. So thank you for having me this morning. And, you know, I love the fact that you just mentioned it's not linear. And when I look back on my career, and my children are now in their mid-30s, but when they were going through college and navigating decision-making about life choices, I used to say there are so few people that know at the age of 4 that this is the career that they're going to be on, and they dedicate every moment to being prepared for that. So as you go through high school and you go through college, if you're not sure, that's okay, because what you're doing is accumulating experiences, and they may not be necessarily the job of your dreams, but think about what you take away from each one of those experiences. What are you learning? What are you exposed to? How are you challenging yourself? And I certainly didn't know in college what I wanted to do. I come from a family that my grandfather founded La Opinion in 1926 here in Los Angeles. It was run by my father for 40 years. I never knew my grandfather. He passed away before I was born. But when I think about what were the conversations in my household like, I was too young to be a child of the 60s, but I was completely influenced by the civil rights movements of the 60s, by what we saw happening on college campuses, advocating for change, for more equity, for more inclusion, for civil and human rights for all people. Those were the conversations that were taking place in my household. So I knew, Wendy, when I think about what were the things that motivated me, I say I stand on the shoulders of greatness, that the conversations that, you know, you can come to this country with very little, and yet if you have a perspective that change is possible, that we are contributing, that we belong, that we are the architects of the new Los Angeles, that's what I was infused with. And so when I finally made the choice, it wasn't until I was 30 years old, I had been living in the Bay Area. I decided early in my career, I was not going to be that child that was immediately tracked to go join the family business and meet the expectations of my family. But I had to prove to myself as a young woman that I could do it on my own, that I could gather the qualities of leadership and commitment and service outside of the family business, but then if I could bring them in, that could be really powerful because then it becomes a purposeful choice. My affiliation with La Opinion was not because it was expected, because I was a child of the owner, but because it was a purposeful choice. And so when I think about what are those things, one is service, the other is purpose, and we heard the word over and over this morning about what's your passion. Where can you have meaning? Where can you find that you have meaningful impact? And then how do you prepare yourself to actually deliver against that? And I think those are some of the core things that have guided me. And don't worry if you don't know. Don't worry if you don't know right out of the get-go. There's a notion that I've been reading a lot about, which is connecting the dots. And as you make your way through your life, you're actually connecting dots that eventually get you prepared to do some of the amazing things that I've been able to do.
I always say I'm still trying to figure out what I want to be when I grow up.
Yeah.
So, and still figuring that out. So we were having a conversation, and I think this actually came from Lisa. I'll give you credit, Lisa Gritzner, on this when we were thinking of good questions. And she talked about the fact that you find gaps in the world and figure out how to fill them. Which I thought was really amazing, that each of your jobs and positions have been when there is a need for someone to step up as a leader. And one of those things that you have a brand new project that you're working on, as we all know, trusting in the media, having, everything is being consolidated, et cetera, but you're wanting to make sure that they focus on really significant issues that are facing our community. Can you tell us a little bit about that project?
I will, but I really appreciate that about finding gaps and then filling them. And for me, that goes to entrepreneurial mindset. It goes to what we just talked about, which is when there's a problem, how can you take your talents, your experiences, and problem solve? And in many ways, and I'm going to digress just for a minute and answer your question, but when I came into La Opinion, it was 1985. My dad was just retiring, and it was time for the next generation to come in. And well established, we were celebrating our 60th anniversary. So 60 years was really significant, but there was so much more that we could do, so much more to be relevant, so much more to tell the stories of the Latino community in Los Angeles, to bridge our community with those who were in elected office and setting policy, and to give voice to people who felt that they had not been seen, heard, represented, listened to. And so we really shifted our mindset. And we identified what we called what many of you, if you're in business school, our BHAG, our big, hairy, audacious goal. And our BHAG was to not be really good within the ethnic media ecosystem, but to be a major metropolitan daily newspaper, to pull ourselves up and say, it is time for us to compete and that we can succeed among the very best of them. And so how do you professionalize? How do you build a team? How do you recognize what are the strengths? What are the stories that are not being told? And we were profoundly successful. It was extraordinary what I did at the Aspen Institute. So where are ways in which we can stitch together opportunity that opens up not opportunity just for the business that you're running, but for the people that you represent? And right now, what we have found is that there is a crisis in local journalism. It is profound, it is deep, it is one that we find very troubling in Los Angeles. We hear about it every single day, where newsrooms are being downsized. And so you ask yourself, maybe that's a commercial business failure. Maybe they didn't adapt quickly enough. Maybe they didn't change their business model. All that might be true. But what's at stake? What's at stake if, in fact, we don't have a strong, thriving local news ecosystem? What does that mean for our democracy? What does that mean for representation? What does that mean for voice? What does that mean for narrative? How do we bring people into the room to have them feel like they actually have agency with the policies that are being made and accountability for those who are making them? So we are launching, it's not a very sexy name. I'm sure there's marketers here. We're calling it right now as a working title, the LA Local News Initiative. But we are really looking at, can we create a nonprofit model because of the challenges we went through at La Opinion. Obviously, the commercial model is really stressed right now. So can we actually build out a nonprofit local news ecosystem that recognizes that there's not one single entity that can serve the information needs of all Los Angeles? And so how do we actually support, sustain, and invest in the nonprofit news ecosystem and pull them into a partnership so that actually we're able to tell the stories and give agency and give voice to communities that currently don't feel represented in our local media? And if you're able to do that successfully and you think about, you know, mission, service, impact, meaning, years from now, we will be holding government accountable. People will see themselves represented. They will be more engaged civically, and we will be better informed, and our democracy will be sustained and strengthened. So it's our new BHAG. It's our new audacious goal, and we're going to call on all of you to participate with us because we need partners. We can't do this alone. So I hope
well, that's exciting, and you guys heard it first. It is not really out there in the ecosystems yet. So you are hearing a little bit of the flavor, but it is exciting because we do need that. And once again, filling in a gap that is necessary. So the next step is, we've talked a little about corporate boards, but you have been in the foundation world as well, both running a foundation, serving on a number of boards. What's kind of different from running a business to running a foundation? One, I do know you get to give away money, which is always great. I mean, that's like the best part. But tell me a little bit about how that's changed.
Yeah, it's so interesting, Wendy, because I grew up in the private sector. I as you heard, ran a company for 30 years, served on corporate boards. And somebody used the term retirement, and with women friends of my vintage, somebody said that to me the other day, our vintage, and I'm like, okay, well, I guess we get better with age. So my vintage, we're not retiring, we're rewiring. Some people refer to it as your encore career. And when I left media, and to tell you the truth, it was really hard. It was really hard. Family owned and operated for 90 years. And I loved every minute of it. I loved every day. I loved the power of what we were doing, the people that were on staff. It was just like we were on fire. But there was an acquisition that wasn't intentional on our part, but an offer was made and the company sold. And then I was like, I went through a grieving period. I'm like, what am I going to do? And I realized that having served on nonprofit boards, like so many of you, this was an opportunity for me to find my passion, my sense of purpose, and to do it through philanthropy. And so I was recruited to lead College Futures Foundation. And one of my through lines, Wendy, was higher education. I mean, it was really clear to me, especially doing work early in my career, that one of the great contributors to inequity is our educational system. And many of us have, worked locally with LA Unified and the other school districts. I was privileged enough to serve on the board of USC. I served on the UC Board of Regents.
I don't hold that against you, being a Bruin, just so you know, and to my other panelists.
That is a story I want to tell because we had some folks earlier talk about their experience as college trustees. But anyway, so what did I find different in philanthropy? when you're in business, you are measuring output every single day. You are on deadline, you have quantifiable measurements, you have built a team, you built a strategy, you're delivering, and you are running it against a P&L. And you've got to every day make sure that your profits are higher than your losses, that you've got a sustainable business model. You come with an innovative mindset. You ask yourself, how do I continuously improve? Look around corners, recognize that the industry continues to evolve. So you've got to have an innovative mindset. I mean, you're like this. And you're also communicating a vision, and you're inspiring people to want to go on that journey with you. And I remember, you mentioned Apple. I remember when we had just gone through the financial crisis, some of our most significant revenue streams were decimated. And I always did town halls with my entire staff. And I said, this is an opportunity. It's an opportunity for us to be agile, to be adaptive, to come to this with a creative mindset, to not be, so concerned about what's lost, but see the opportunity about what's ahead. And I picked up my iPad and I said, this didn't exist a year ago. Didn't exist a year ago. And so let's think about how customer choice is changing the nature of our business. So be customer centric. Always think, about, what are the external trends? What do your customers want from you? How do you maintain the core values, but evolve the organization? And then when you get to philanthropy, it's like, well, who's your customer? What are the metrics? Who's being held accountable? It's just a sense of urgency. And maybe because I did come out of the private sector, and that was exactly what my board was looking for, because especially in higher ed, I said, I live in the world of hyperbole because I think there's a way of stimulating. So I was like, this is our climate change issue of today. If we don't get this right for our young people today, imagine our ability to maintain competitiveness, to be on the cutting edge of innovation. We need to invest in our young people today. And the fact that we have these gaps in college graduation, let's stop blaming the student. Let's stop blaming their parents. Let's stop blaming the circumstances in which they grew up. Let's look at the structural barriers that make it hard for learners of today to succeed. And so this was the issue that we transformed our thinking about what College Futures does and how it does it to be much more about transformational systems change. What are the structural barriers that make it so hard? And then go after those. And we organized in a way that, not unlike business, but I said, what are the primary levers of change in philanthropy? And you have to deliver a programmatic model that works. So do you have the program that works? Then you've got to convince people that there's a problem and that they want to join you in the quest for a solution. So we elevated strategic communications, which we hadn't done before. It used to be a publishing house. Oh, let's do some research and publish it and hope somebody reads the data that we just released. So we actually became much more sort of forward thinking about strategic communications. I hired in a director of public policy because where do those issues sit? They sit in the public sphere. And we needed to activate our networks of advocates and the ecosystem of advocacy and policy change. And then we had a strategic director of learning. And so those were the things that became fundamental: data, learning, advocacy and policy, strategic communications, strong programmatic work, and then recognizing the transformation, systems change work, is you're in it for the long term, right? So there is no immediate win. You might get a policy win, but for that to actually deliver against the goals that you want. So we just, lastly, Wendy, just to give you an example, when this governor was determining the budget, and public higher education in California has multiple revenue streams, but it's mostly general fund from the state and then tuition. But the state, working with them, we said, okay, is there a mechanism for holding the systems accountable? And so the funding was actually dependent on improved graduation rates for students of color, first generation, undocumented students, improved time to degree, more Californians making their way through the system. So tie the incentives to outcomes. And in many ways, I mean, those are just basic business principles, but it was interesting. I'm no longer with College Futures. I do sit on the board of the Weingart Foundation. And there, our mission is economic, social, and racial justice. Yeah. So how do you get there? And what are the ways in which you build movements for a more equitable, just society? And that's the difference between running a business and being in philanthropy, because you do it through others, you do it in partnership, you do it through movement building, power building, but those are the North Stars that I think many of us are committed to.
Well, and we appreciate that with so many Cal State students and high school students here today, that throughput and the importance of it. And we can see the difference it makes when someone invests in them and invests in the structures that are going to help them in the future. And you talk about, social justice and that, and you go onto these huge corporate boards. And I do have to make a shout out to Nadine Watt, who is here, because I'm on a corporate board because Nadine recommended me for a corporate board. And that's the way that it happens, is that someone says, and then once you're on one board, they go, oh, you went through the whole SEC review, you must be okay, and then it goes from there. So it is important for women to support women, as Madeleine Albright said in one of her quotes, that what is it? You're going to go to hell if you don't support women. I mean, it's something like that. It's so
succinct.
Just telling you that. But anyways, you made this transition and served on, again, Disney, Apple, Target, Bank of America, and I know there's others. What for you? What kind of lessons have you learned? What is a little bit of difference of serving on these two and going forward?
Yeah, thank you, Wendy. I'm going to rewind, if that's okay, and pick up from where the last panel about how did you get on your first board. And I was young at the time when I was making, a career path. I became the chief operating officer of La Opinion. Eventually, I became the publisher and CEO. Very few women that were running companies. But I went on the board of the YMCA of Greater Los Angeles. I was very connected to the civic life of Los Angeles. And it wasn't my first board. I started off, in immigrants' rights and doing other smaller nonprofit boards. But when I was recruited onto the board of the Y, back then, not probably unlike today, the people sitting around the table were really engaged, committed civic leaders. And one of the people that I served with, as was said earlier, he watched, he observed. A couple of years later, he said, you come prepared, you ask the right questions, you understand board culture. I think you would make a great director. And it was a bank, Renata. I didn't know that I shouldn't love being on the board of a bank, but, highly regulated. But I took him up on his offer, and I learned, and it was an amazing experience. It was a local regional bank. Eventually, it was acquired, and then I went on to the board of another bank, again, local, regional. And it was, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 years later, where Bank of America asked if I would consider coming onto the board. And I only say that because with nonprofit service, I had a sponsor. There was somebody who saw me, believed in me, and opened a door for me. And then again, to your point, it goes in zigzag. It's not linear. I tell my kids this, hey, I didn't start with the CEO title, so you guys, you're not going to start there either. You work your way up. You acquire experiences. You demonstrate your capacity. And so it's been, I'm going to give just one more example, if you don't mind. I was recruited onto the board, again, very early in my career, onto the board of USC. There were only 4 women on the board at the time. It was, I think, the late 1980s, and then President Zumberg was leaving, and they were bringing in Steve Sample to be president. He and I attended our first board meetings together, and I had no idea what I was getting into. I mean, none whatsoever. I wasn't an alum. My name wasn't on a building. I had no affiliation with USC. You know, we had UCLA and Notre Dame in my family, and so USC was like, you know, traitor. And Steve Sample, God bless him, he saw something in me, and he knew that he had a vision for the university to be more connected and anchored in Los Angeles. And so he created a committee called the Public Affairs Committee, and he asked me to chair it. And so he gave me the space that I could occupy and feel comfortable in, where I could demonstrate leadership skills. And I could get comfortable being in a room where I did not belong, and I felt like I didn't belong. I mean, the culture of the social networks at USC, sort of Trojan family for life. I totally get that. I served on that board for 24 years. But at the time, I felt so out of place. I mean, like total master of imposter syndrome. Get ready, walk in, be strong, be brave. It's okay, take a deep breath. And Steve Sample gave me space to find my voice and to demonstrate my leadership. And I will forever be grateful, because what I've learned from that is that we owe that to everybody else as well. That there are going to be women that come along with us and after us. And, you know, just last night, I'm on the phone with the woman that I'm mentoring, suggesting to her, you can do it. You're ready to be a CFO of a major company. So let's get you ready for that. And that, I feel, is my obligation. When I took over College Futures, I came in from the outside, and I said, I owe it to my board to deliver a CEO-ready candidate. I owe it to them. And so I mentored a woman who I thought had all the capabilities to do it. And I said, except for one thing, you've never run strategy. So I'm going to give you strategy, and we're going to work together, and you are going to run that. So when you're in an interview and they ask you, give me an example when you developed a strategy for your organization and were able to deliver, and how did you do it, and how did you bring people along, you're going to have a concrete example to give them. And so that, to me, is where I believe we need to be today. And this, I haven't even answered your question about corporate boards. I'm sorry.
This is good. This is good. I'm good.
Corporate boards are, they're everything that you heard before. Be ready. Be ready, be prepared. There's a reason why you're there. Own your voice. And
serve on the audit committee, because that's what Nadine made me serve on the audit committee.
So interesting. When I've served on all of them, governance and non, because that's where the pipeline is. The audit committee, because it gives you full view into the entire company. But right now I chair in 2 of my boards what we call the compensation and human capital. And why do I love it? Because that's where you develop the talent. That's where you make sure that you're creating pipeline opportunities, that you have programs for people, that your pay practices are equitable, that you're creating an environment of belonging and investment in you and well-being. And at the end of the day, last thing I'm going to say, because I know it's time. When I first became a CEO, I went onto a YouTube site, and there was an individual who had become the CEO of one of the largest companies in the country, and he had moved in from the COO. And I'm like, oh, I moved from COO to CEO. What do I need to learn? And he said that one thing I didn't know, I knew everything about operations. I can run this company with my eyes closed. The CEO is the chief culture officer. The CEO is the culture carrier. The CEO is the one who defines culture. And so to the point about tone at the top, imagine if the board has that same perspective around investing in people and being a great place to work, and asks questions about inclusion and diversity, and getting people, you know, not just ready, but getting them into that seat where they're one step away from the CEO, just like I was able to do in my organization. That's our commitment. That's my commitment at the board. And luckily, I serve with really visionary CEOs who share that commitment. I remember when I went in for my Apple final meeting with Tim Cook, and I'm like, you could have anybody in the world. Why me? And he said, I'm not hiring a technologist. I have technology specialists all across this company. I need somebody with a perspective and experience like yours. And that was so welcoming. So anyway.
Well, he was smart. He was smart. And you can see why my young self of meeting Monica Lozano, how impressive she is. And thank you. Thank you, Monica. She does mentor people. She is always there. She's always been there for me. And I remembered the quote now, there's a special place in hell for women who don't help women. So just remember that, and to the men as well. So thank you very much. And now it is my pleasure, because we're going to stay right on time, to introduce Veronica Omar, Vice President and District Manager of Wells Fargo, for closing remarks. Thank you. Thank you, VICA. Monica.
All right, good morning. What an amazing morning. So inspirational, so many incredible leaders. I'm gonna cut a couple of things here just to make up some time, but we are so proud to be a co-sponsor of this incredible event. We have some raffles to do, select some winners. So a couple things. If Lupita, if you can join me on stage to do the raffle drawing. So a couple different things. If you win, let me see you. Shake your hand, stand up. You can't win if you're not here. Rule number one. Rule number two, I don't have any gifts up here for you guys. You guys are gonna see Kathy on your way out, so make sure that you go see Kathy to claim your prize. And then let's go ahead and get started with the first one. So for the VICA swag basket and Valley Village tickets, the winner is, okay, Lupita, choose a good one. Vanessa Perez. Ooh, all right. So Kathy, on your way out, okay? Okay, for the first piece of Kendra Scott jewelry, this is a hot one with the staff of VICA. Let's see, it's CSUN, Eric Martinez. I don't see you. Oh, he's in the front. I see you. All right, we have a winner. Guess what? There's a second Kendra Scott jewelry. Who will our winner be? Brisa Vargas? Is she here? Yeah? Okay. Very, very nice. We have a hot off the... All right, this one's new. This is the latest one. We have a signed Valerie Bartinelli cookbook provided by the Granada Hills Charter. And the lucky winner for that one is... I don't see a name. Do you see a name? I don't see a name on that one. Or are you guys making it hard for me? I didn't bring my phone up here. All right, Yana, very nice. And then the last prize that we have is round trip Southwest airline ticket. Oh, who will be the lucky winner? I know everybody's holding their breath. I like it. Let's see. Brian Lamb. Ah, Wells Fargo. Awesome, congratulations. So friendly reminder, you're seeing Kathy on your way out for all of the winners. And then just really quickly, we do have a couple of VICA events. So that we have the VICA Congressional Breakfast on May 30th, the VICA After Dark with LAPD Deputy Chief Ruby Flores and Council Member John Lee on May 14th. With that said, thank you guys for joining. Have a great rest of your evening. Bye, everyone. You want to keep these?
Thank you, Wendy and Lisa. You outdo yourselves every single year. These panels were phenomenal.